Hey guys, welcome to Dedicated. My name is Andy, and in this video I'm going to show you how to tile a shower. This is part of my bathroom remodel videos where I took my guest bathroom and fully remodeling everything myself, basically tore it down and doing everything step by step from scratch. If you want to follow along, hit that subscribe button and check out the videos that I already have posted in the cards or in the links below. So let's get started. So first you want to measure the tile you're using and the space you're going to be using in between the tile, and basically plan out how you want to set up the tile. I'm using, I believe they're 6x18 pieces, and I want to put them in a brick pattern to where I have one in the perfect center. So I want to figure out my vertical height first. So I measure my total height and determine where I want to start and how small my pieces on the bottom and top are going to be. Since the top is the place where people mostly will look at, you want to make sure you have a whole piece, more of a whole piece on the top versus the bottom. But it's always good to split the difference sometimes to where you don't really have a really small cut in the bottom or the top, because that just doesn't look nice. It also helps to use a beam of some sort, like a straight wood plank that you can mount to the cement board. That way you can start it from a level, because since the bottom you're going to have a slope, and then you're going to do the floor tile first, or you're going to put the mud set. You want to make sure that you have a straight, nice leveled edge you can build on and all the way to the top, and then you finish off the bottom a little bit later, and I'll go through that as we go along. Next, you want to measure out your center line, because that's what you're going to be using to center your tiles in the middle, if that's what you're going for. And that's what I'm basically doing. I'm making a nice symmetrical front back wall, and you always start with that wall first and then do the side walls next. So after marking my measurements, you draw a line and you can start tiling. So some of the tools you'll need to get started is a mastic. Actually, no, wrong. Mastic is not for shower, because it's not really good for a water product. I didn't really realize that until my brother, who does tile for a living, pointed that out to me. So later on I used actual thin set instead of mastic, but I'll show that later on in the video. But the top of that wall I ended up using mastic, which is fine because technically the data sheet allows it, but I'm not going to get into that details. You need a bucket with the sponge, a margin trowel, and you'll need a 1/4 inch tile trowel. So typically you would use thin set and mix it to a proper mixture, which I'm not going to get into that. You just read the directions on the bag. In my case, I'm using the mastic, and applying, regardless whether it's mastic or thin set on the wall, is the same. So basically you just take the margin trowel, put it on your 1/4 inch trowel, and start spreading it evenly as possible before you put any tiles down. Do a small area at a time. That will cover maybe 2 or 3 tiles, and then basically just repeat the process as you go along before you reach a cut. Now, when placing a tile, you want to make sure you know where your line, the guideline, the center line that you drew is, and basically just carefully put it onto that beam that you have. And once you have it in position you want it, you basically kind of press it in and move it around, make sure that it's intact, or I don't know the word, you're squishing it in so that way the thin set is engaging with your tile, and continue doing that tile at a time. Now, the tile I'm using doesn't require spacers. It already it gives you like a, I think, 1/16 gap. If you are using spacers, make sure you follow the procedures by putting the spacers in all the corners. Like I said, I'm not going to get into that because most shower tiles you don't require spacers unless you're using the bigger ones. So I'm going to skip that step for now. So typically I like to put enough tiles to where I have multiple cuts, so that way I can work on the cuts all together. That way I am measuring a few of them and cutting a few of them at a time instead of going back and forth for each one. But that is totally up to you, however way you want to do it. Plus, what I like to do is spread as much as I can. That way I can put as much tiles as I can and kind of making the pace go faster. But this is totally up to you. Now, to measure the pieces that need to be cut, that main wall is not as critical in terms of the accuracy of the cut, because that wall will be covered with the sidewall tile. So you can technically leave an 1/8 space, maybe even bigger, as long as it's not bigger than the thickness of your tile. So that way you got to make sure it will cover that edge. Now, for attaching small cut pieces, especially since you're doing afterwards, there might not be any thin set in those corners. What I like to do is to put the thin set directly on the back of the tile. That way I can make sure that it covers the entire surface, and it's probably the least messiest way to do this, because if I try to get into that little corner with my big trowel, I'm gonna get the other tiles around it probably all messy. So it's just easier this way for me personally. Now, there's two ways you can cut this. You can use a standard, it's like a manual tile cutter, as you see here. These are fairly inexpensive for someone who does this for a living, that they can buy at Home Depot. Or you can use a tile hand grinder or an angle grinder with a diamond blade to cut. Now again, this tile cutter that I have right here is maybe 25-30 bucks. I'm not really sure, but you can buy an inexpensive one online, and I'll have all the links to all my tools below. So some of the cuts like this one will require you to use a hand grinder. There's no way you can cut this type of cut with a regular tile cutter, because you have to come from both sides and meet in the middle. These grinders are fairly easy to use. Just follow the line that you drawn on your tile and cut one edge at a time. Now start with the smaller, thinner edge, because that's more likely to break, and cut that first before you cut the other side. Then continue finishing off the tile on the back wall all the way to the top. The more of these cuts you do, the better you will get. So one little trick to prevent this piece from sliding down, I put clear tape right here and right here. And then since this one's fresh still, I put tape right here so it doesn't go that way. So make sure you have some spare tiles in case you break 1 or 2 tiles in the process. Next, I started with the wall on the right side, and I set up the same way, where I put the beam first, and except this time I used a metal schluter, I think they're called. I'm not really sure a proper name for it, but basically it's like this edge that gives you a nice finished look on the sides of your tile. And basically I just measured out how far I want to go out and pretty much screwed it in on the top and bottom and used a level to make sure it was leveled. I'll remove those screws eventually once I start putting tile over it, and then the tile will hold the edge piece in place, and then I will be able to remove the screws on top and bottom without having to worry that the edge is no longer leveled. Once everything is in place, I measured my center line again and started tiling the side wall. Now I made sure that my alignment of my beam was on the same level as the grout line from the other wall. That way my design looked like it was a continuous brick pattern throughout all the walls. Next, I tiled the notch that I have, both of them. So I used the mosaic piece for my back wall, and I put that up first. Since this is a mosaic piece and it's at an angle, I had to cut one piece at a time and put those all around to fill in the gaps on the sides. And then I basically did the top and bottom tile, and then lastly the sides. That way my sides kind of hold my top tile, even though the top tile will be fine, but that's just how I decided to do it. Then I finished off the knot with some bullnose pieces on the outside, on the perimeter, to make it look nice and give it a nice edge. Plus since it's a thicker piece, it pops out and makes it a nice finished look. Next, I did the tile inside the window. Here I also used the Schluter edge piece and pre-cut the top and the sides before starting the tile. The idea here is to dry fit it first before placing the tile and measuring the tile. That way I had the Schluter pieces to make sure everything fits. I placed the top tile first, then added the top Schluter. I used a piece of clear tape to make sure the edge piece was secure in place and didn't move on me. I also used a 2x4 to support the tile from falling. So I waited about an hour and then worked on the other side of the top and used that 2x4 to support. Then I finished the window by installing the side tiles. Lastly, I finished tiling the bottom. After the shower floors were completed, I used painter's tape to help me hold up the tile as I was going from top to bottom. And the next step of the process would be grouting the tile, which I will show you in a different video. So if you like this type of stuff, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And thanks you guys for watching. If you really enjoyed this, I would appreciate if you smash that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.